parents sending graphic gender ideology books to Texas officials in child safeguarding effort. So normally I have the pleasure of reading all of this article out loud to you, but tonight we are actually blessed to have the author of this article, Sarah, on the podcast. So Sarah, if you want me to read any part of this article, feel free to let me know. But first and foremost, do you want to kind of just give us a little bit of background on this?
Yes, absolutely. So this article was written because here in Tyler, Texas, we have been fighting against our public library board for several years now. The parents have arrived there. They have spoken at the public library board meetings and have brought up concerns over pornographic materials that were found not just within the library, but within the youth section of the library. So this material was available to children. And there were certain books that were found, such as Out of Darkness, which is extremely sexually explicit, and All Boys Aren't Blue, which is not just sexually explicit, but depicts situations of incest and pedophilia. And it's deeply disturbing. And we have showed up several times and spoken regarding our concerns with these books. The problem is that the library board, save for one person who's a very good friend of mine, actually, the rest of the library board is very woke, and they look at their leadership as the Marxist ALA, because the ALA is currently being led by a president who is a Marxist, or self-proclaimed Marxist. And that is who they take their marching orders from. And so this has been a fight for several years. And at the last board meeting, it was incredible. The parents showed up in droves. I was there. So many amazing local political activists showed up at that board meeting and spoke about their concerns regarding the books. And the two books, Out of Darkness and All Boys Aren't Blue, were brought up, and a vote was going to be held on whether they should be moved from the youth section to the adult section of the library. I spoke, and my very good friend Kristen Bentley spoke, and I'll talk about her in just a few minutes, because the Dirty 30 campaign, which is what we have started, the idea came from her. But I brought up the fact that if they did not listen to us and they did not do as the parents had asked them to do, that we were going to blow this up, that we were going to make this known. We were going to make sure that people outside of that local area knew about what they were doing. And we were going to provide a solution, and we were going to go above their heads until they did what we wanted them to do. I told them I had a large platform and I was going to use it because God gave it to me, and I'm going to use it for the right thing. They halfway listened to us, and they only moved Out of Darkness, and they left All Boys Aren't Blue in the youth section of the library. That was the final vote at the end. And it was very disturbing, including the fact that at the very end, all of us are Christians. I'm a Christian. As I said, I brought up God, and I said, God gave me this ability to bring attention to this, so I'm going to use it. There was an elderly lady on the board who spoke up after the vote had already been taken. People were upset. The board meeting was just about over. And she spoke up and she said that Christians ought to be ashamed of themselves for speaking up against these books. It was absolutely, to me, a very disgusting display of just absolute hypocritical behavior for calling out Christians for wanting pornographic materials removed from children's eyes. And so from there, we decided to go ahead and begin with Joanne Fleming, who's Grassroots of America. She has a very large organization here in East Texas. She's an amazing human being. And under her, we have started this campaign called the Dirty 30, which is a campaign where we are going to be sending a dirty book to all of the local officials here in Tyler, Texas. So the mayor, the city officials, all the officials within commissioner's court, and yeah, we're going to be asking for a public hearing and asking for it to be in the evening so that parents can come after they are, finished working and come and speak their piece regarding the issue with the local library. And so far, the article that I wrote has now reached over 300,000 views. It's making headway.
Wow. Yeah, and you guys can check that out on thepublica.com. I highly recommend it. It's a great read, and we may reference some of it here in a moment, but it's really unfortunate that you even have to do this. I mean, it's wild to think that these type of graphic materials are making their way into the hands of small children because officials in charge just don't want to listen to the constituents that they serve. And that's really just a shame that the one individual made a point to bring your faith into question, or I should say slander your faith by saying Christians have no right to, I guess, be vocalizing against these inappropriate, explicit materials falling into the hands of children. So that's absolutely ridiculous.
Was this woman's point of view that it was unchristian of you to take this position, or was her point of view that Christian sensibilities should not play a role in your having a position?
She said that we should be ashamed as Christians because our position was discriminatory against the LGBTQ plus community. That's basically what it was, because that's what they see it. They see it
Obviously
as an attack.
a serious theologian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. My
So
goodness.
that's
The moral
that's
high ground is
essentially what it
strong
was.
there, certainly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Ron, tell us more of your initial reaction to this story and just everything that's going on here.
Well, nothing really surprises me anymore, though I think that the effort that Sarah and her allies are undertaking is a very nice and novel one. I've been very familiar with this issue for a while because I mentioned before we were talking that my wife writes for Legal Insurrection. She interviewed Nicole Solis, who everyone knows is a very big activist in this area in Rhode Island. And I had actually Nicole on my podcast a couple of times to discuss what's going on in the case where she was sued by the school district. And then the school district backed off, but the teachers union continued her lawsuit against her. What did she do? She wanted to know what was on the curriculum. And she stood on her rights and she demanded that they tell her what the curriculum was, and ultimately they sued her. So I've been all too familiar with this. I saw, I'm also, again, through my wife's work, got to know some other activists, and I've seen how they will prevent people at these public meetings, at these school board meetings or school committee meetings, from seeing what's in these books. So what Sarah is doing by actually making sure that the books really get out there and people have a real understanding of what it is that they're voting for, because to some extent it's virtue signaling. They're not necessarily, they think of it as virtue, which no one in this conversation does, but they think of themselves as representing the zenith of tolerance. And it's important for them to understand what it is that they're tolerating, because there is a moral responsibility when you're in charge of children, especially, not to tolerate everything.
Yeah.
Right. And I think another thing is that I think, so we've been fighting this for several years as well. And this method that we're using as far as sending these dirty books to local officials has already worked in the past. And I think that speaks volumes. Since it's already worked with the Texas legislature in getting these books removed from public school libraries, then we take it to a local level since it has worked before. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we can work to expose this. I truly believe that's what God has commanded us to do, is to expose this, as according to Ephesians 5:11 says that we're to take no part in these evil works, but we're to expose it. But I think that people are also so tired of seeing it and knowing that it's happening, and not seeing any answers or being given a solution to the problem. And I think that's what's so unique about what we're doing and about what I wrote about, is that it is giving people an ability to take action and do the same thing in their own communities, because this is not something that's difficult. You get a few people together, you figure out these people's emails, you figure out, how you can mail something to them, and that's it, and then once you have their attention, which, it's pretty easy to grab someone's attention with these books. You begin to ask them, okay, are you listening to us now? Can we now have the floor? And it's worked before, and I truly believe it's going to work again. I think we're on the 8th or the 9th day now. So, and something else I want to point out, and I didn't go into too much detail in it in my article, but I sent an email to every single city official here locally, and I sent an email to all of the board members of the library, asking them, not only are you aware of this issue, but can you make comment on it? Because this is very concerning, and everyone is very worried about this. Not a single person responded except for one, and that was my good friend that's on the library board. And she literally told me, she said, "You're not going to hear from anybody." She said, "No one," she said, "I would be very surprised if anybody else responded to your email." So because they did not respond to me, that was very telling, that they are hoping that if they ignore this, it's going to go away, and we're not going to let it go away.
Good for you. Michael,
Sarah,
what's your
I have
reaction?
Yeah. I have a question for you, Sarah, and that's largely regarding how are these books introduced to the library in the first place? Are these library officials going through a vetting process and introducing them to the shelves, or how are they being brought in to begin with?
So there's several different ways. One of the ways is that these books are being brought in bundles. And so some of these books, such as All Boys Aren't Blue and Gender Queer, which is extremely graphic, have been given awards. And since they have been given awards, they come in bundles of books that have been given awards. Okay, this is an award-winning bundle right here. So they arrive in a bundle, they purchase, they get the bundle, and they put it onto the shelves. But another thing is that a lot of these librarians and those who approve these books, they know exactly what they're doing. They know what books that sometimes are requesting and putting into the youth section. There was also an open records request that was written asking the library if any of these books had been flagged as explicit material in any way, and several other things were asked. But one of the big things to note is that some of the publishers of these books actually contacted the librarian and the board and told them that these books do not belong in the youth section, that they are meant for adults, and those publishers were actually ignored. So they know what they're doing. They know that these books are being purposely placed on these shelves for children to access.
Good grief. And for those who don't know, for those who are maybe unaware of those titles and maybe have yet to, read Sarah's article, which I highly recommend doing, these books are definitely explicit. I mean, Gender Queer, it's all cartoon artwork, right? But
it's depicting sexual actions.
Exactly. And explicitly sexual actions that I can't even repeat the kind of actions that are being depicted in this book on YouTube for fear of our video being taken down. I mean, so I can't even verbally describe it to you what they're showing that these children have access to. So, I mean, it's just wild.